It happens at noon, under a sky so ordinary that no one thinks to fear it. Traffic moves through bright intersections. Airliners cross clean blue air. Sunlight lies warm on rooftops, glass towers, farm fields, schoolyards, harbors. Then, without warning, the star that has governed every day in human history is gone, not dimmed, not eclipsed, gone. Yet, for a few final minutes, the world still shines, because the last sunlight, already on its way, keeps racing toward Earth, and nobody below understands that normal life has already ended. That delay is what makes the thought so haunting. For roughly 8 minutes and 20 seconds, the planet would keep glowing as if nothing had changed. People would keep talking, driving, buying coffee, opening doors, checking messages, planning dinner. Birds would still circle above city streets. Waves would still glitter. Somewhere, children would still be laughing in playgrounds, all while the source of that light no longer existed in the sky. And then, in a single, irreversible instant, daylight would fail everywhere at once. No sunset, no warning color, no slow descent into evening, just a world dropped into an unnatural darkness that does not belong to weather, storm, or season. Science gives this scenario its real power. The sun is not just a lamp hanging above Earth. It is the central mass that holds our planet in orbit, the engine behind climate, the clock that organizes waking and sleep, migration and flowering, hunger and harvest. If the sun truly vanished, its light would disappear after those same 8 minutes and 20 seconds. So would its gravitational influence. Earth would not stop in space, but it would stop circling the place where the sun had been. That much follows from well-understood physics. What happens next, over one day, can be explored with real scientific reasoning. Researchers have modeled how quickly surface temperatures might begin to fall, how oceans would cling to their heat longer than land, and how power grids, aviation, satellites, and agriculture would confront a crisis no civilization has ever rehearsed, but all civilization depends on surviving now, somehow. That is where this journey begins, not in fantasy for its own sake, but in a careful descent through consequences, what you would see, what the sky would become, how fast the world would cool, how cities would react, how animals would behave, and how human beings might endure the longest day fear has ever created. The question is hypothetical, but the forces inside it are real, and that is what makes it so unsettling. If you enjoy slow, immersive explorations like this, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from tonight. And now, let the room grow dim. Let your breathing slow. Leave the noise of the modern world a little farther behind. Imagine the last ordinary noon, the last familiar warmth on your skin, and the moment the sky forgets the sun. For a little while longer, nothing changes. The sunlight still falls across windowsills and highway railings. It still flashes on rivers, on the curved sides of parked cars, on the wings of gulls banking over harbors. Somewhere, it lies in warm rectangles across kitchen floors. Somewhere else, it pours down a canyon of office towers and turns the glass into white fire. If you were standing outside in those last ordinary minutes, you would feel no tremor under your feet, no warning in the air, no deep mechanical shudder passing through the earth. The disappearance of the sun would not announce itself with thunder. It would hide itself inside normality, using light already in transit as a kind of borrowed time. That is one of the strangest gifts physics can give a disaster.
The sun may be gone, and yet its image, its brightness, its familiar authority in the sky would continue for a brief and almost cruel delay. The reason is simple enough to say, even if the feeling of it is hard to accept. The sun is not close in human terms. It is close only in the language of stars. So, the last sunlight that left its surface before the moment of disappearance would keep racing outward at the same speed it always has, crossing the vacuum, crossing the silent emptiness between star and planet, and for a little more than 8 minutes, Earth would still live inside an illusion of continuity. You can imagine how gentle those final minutes would look. A gardener bends to tie up a plant in a backyard. A train slips over a river bridge. Children in schoolyards squint into the brightness and throw their shadows long across painted concrete. Pilots glance at instruments and then out through the windshield into clear radiance. Solar panels drink in the light as if the day will continue forever. In observatories, telescopes track other objects because no one has yet been given reason to believe that the brightest object in their sky has ceased to exist. A surgeon in an operating room stands under electric lamps, untouched by the knowledge that all life on Earth has already become a countdown. It would be tempting to imagine that somewhere, instantly, every expert would know. But even the most advanced systems on Earth are built around expected events. They catch storms, flares, impacts, outages, anomalies of known kinds. They do not really contain a category for the outright disappearance of the sun. Instruments would begin to show impossible readings, and impossible readings are, at first, often treated as errors, software glitches, calibration faults, communication delays, a problem at the detector, not in the cosmos. That is how modern civilization protects its sanity. When confronted by an absurd signal, it first assumes a smaller failure. So, during those last minutes, life continues not because human beings are careless, but because the universe has chosen a strange sequence. First, concealment, then revelation. The world is still bright enough for people to buy fruit at outdoor markets, to wait at bus stops, to stroll between museum columns, to carry laundry across apartment rooftops. The ordinary machinery of habit keeps moving. Somewhere, a couple argues quietly at a cafe table. Somewhere, a fisherman checks a knot. Somewhere, a nurse adjusts a curtain to keep sunlight off the eyes of a sleeping patient. The patient sleeps on, warm and unaware beneath a star that no longer exists. If you knew in advance what was coming, those minutes would feel unbearable. Every detail would begin to glow with the tenderness of something about to vanish. You might find yourself staring at small things, dust floating through a shaft of light, the pale outline of a plane against blue, the flicker of a pigeon turning in the air. That is often how the mind responds to catastrophe before it arrives. It narrows. It becomes intimate. It clings to texture. And then the final photons arrive. The change would not feel like evening. Evening has rhythm. Evening gives notice. It drains slowly through color, through angle, through the long unwinding of afternoon. What would happen here would be much more abrupt and much more wrong. One instant, there is a complete day around you. The next, the source of day is gone. The sky does not redden. The horizon does not soften.
the sunlight simply stops reaching Earth. The blue of the atmosphere, which exists because sunlight is scattered through air, would collapse with shocking speed. The ceiling of the world would darken into something deeper than storm cloud, because storm clouds still borrow their drama from a hidden sun. This darkness would have no hidden source behind it. For a moment, perhaps a few startled breaths, your brain might refuse the evidence. Human perception is conservative. It tries to preserve continuity because continuity is usually safer than panic. You might think first of an eclipse, but no ordinary eclipse behaves like this. Even the greatest eclipse leaves a different signature in the world. It approaches, it warns, it carves a track, it is local, it belongs to geometry. Here, the darkness would feel global, immediate, stripped of process. If you were outdoors, your eyes would lift instantly upward, searching for the familiar disk, and what you would find would be an emptiness so unnatural that language would lag behind it. Cars would brake, not all at once, but in waves, as drivers register the wrongness through their windshields. Some would pull over out of instinct. Others would stop in traffic lanes, staring upward. Across city streets, people would step out of buildings and stand shoulder to shoulder, each waiting for someone else to explain what their own senses are reporting. In rural places, the stillness might arrive faster. A tractor idling in a field, a dog barking once and then falling silent, a line of crows rising from a hedge and circling without direction. The first response would not be organized panic. It would be shared disbelief. The sky itself would become an object of terror.
In the absence of sunlight, stars and planets that belong to the daytime sky but are usually hidden by scattered blue light would begin to emerge. Not all at once, and not with the softness of a familiar night, but with a nakedness that feels indecent. A sky full of stars at noon would not necessarily be beautiful in the ordinary sense. Beauty depends on context, on consent, on the quiet understanding that night has come at the right time. A stellar field opening above crowded streets in the middle of the day would feel like a wound in reality, as if the planet had been stripped of one of its protective illusions and exposed directly to the cold architecture beyond. Animals would sense the disruption before they understood it, in the way animals sense almost everything important. Daybirds might suddenly change their calls or seek roosts. Others would remain active, confused by a darkness that came without the thermal and visual cues of sunset. Insects that navigate by light could veer into disarray. Farm animals might crowd toward familiar shelter. Urban pigeons could whirl in tight, unsettled patterns between buildings, their internal clocks colliding with the evidence of their eyes. None of this would be theatrical. Nature rarely performs for us. It would simply begin to misfire in thousands of small, telling ways. Inside homes and offices, the first instinct would be practical. Lights switch on, screens brighten, people check weather apps, news feeds, live maps. But a problem of this scale reveals itself in the failure of ordinary explanation. There is no useful notification for the absence of the sun. Forecast systems are built around air masses, pressure fronts, moisture, fire, dust, cloud, and smoke. They are not built around the sudden removal of the central engine of the whole system. In control rooms and operations centers, People would call up every feed they have, expecting to find the overlooked answer. Across the world, satellite imagery would show a planet entering darkness in a way no meteorologist has ever seen. At first, the voices on television and radio would probably stay measured. That is part of the social contract during uncertainty. Calm buys time. Presenters would repeat what little is known. They would say, officials are investigating. They would mention reports from multiple countries. They would ask specialists to comment. Specialists, in turn, would be careful, because careful speech is one way of refusing panic. But even careful speech has a tone when the impossible begins to outrun it. You would hear that tone. You would hear it in the small pauses before a scientist answers, in the way a pilot phrases a message to passengers, in the fact that nobody wants to say the worst sentence out loud. Yet the physical consequences would not wait for language to catch up. From the moment the last sunlight failed, solar generation would collapse everywhere that depended on direct illumination. Streetlights would switch on where sensors still functioned normally, and in many places, that sudden artificial brightness would make the event feel even more unreal. Neon signs would flicker against a sky full of stars at midday. Office windows would turn yellow from interior lamps. Stadium floodlights would stab upward. Cities would not immediately go dark. In fact, for a short while, they might appear brighter than usual, as human systems tried to compensate for a missing cosmos. The air, meanwhile, would remain almost insultingly ordinary. This matters because it would shape the psychology of the first hour. If the temperature dropped like a stone in the first moments, people would be too overwhelmed by the body to notice the mind. But the Earth stores heat. The atmosphere, the land, the oceans, the buildings, the roads, the water tanks, the walls of houses, the surfaces of cities that have soaked up sunlight all morning and all season long, all of these things would continue radiating warmth. You would still feel the day that had been there. The catastrophe would arrive first as a visual and existential event, not yet as an immediate freezing. That delay in the cooling would be almost more disturbing than a dramatic plunge. It would allow thought to spread. It would let people realize what had happened while their bodies were still warm enough to be afraid in detail. The skin would not yet be screaming. The lungs would not yet burn with extreme cold. Instead, the mind would begin to race ahead, trying
to compute what it already knows in fragments. No sunlight means no day, no photosynthesis, no ordinary weather, no easy answer, no obvious timeline. And somewhere behind all those realizations, a quieter one would begin to form. The sun is not just absent from the sky, it is absent from the architecture of existence. This is the point where experts would start to understand that the event is not an eclipse, not a volcanic veil, not an atmospheric obscuration, not any familiar interruption of sunlight. The clue is not simply darkness, it is the character of darkness, the astronomical readings, the absence of solar radiation, the impossible alignment of reports from every longitude that can still communicate. Somewhere in a darkened control room, a team would compare data from instruments that should never agree on such a conclusion. Somewhere else, astronomers would look where the sun should be and find not a hidden disk, not a partial dimming, but a catastrophic absence. One of the deepest shocks in such a moment would come from how little human culture has prepared for it. We have stories for storms and floods and fire. We have liturgies for plague and famine and war.
We even have myths for eclipses, comets, and falling stars, but the literal disappearance of the sun belongs to a category so far beyond ancestral experience that language would struggle. Some people would turn at once to religion, some to conspiracy, some to science, some simply to family. Panic is never uniform. It expresses itself through whatever a person already trusts. On social media, the effect would be explosive. Video after video would appear from every continent. Dark noon over airports, dark noon over deserts, dark noon over apartment blocks, fishing ports, mountain roads, school football fields, industrial zones, rice paddies, container terminals. The sameness of the event across different cultures would make it more terrible, not less. A local disaster can sometimes be survived by imagining safety elsewhere. Here, the evidence would show the same wrong sky above every language. There would be no untroubled region to fantasize about, no distant place where the sun still shone. You can imagine the first search terms. Is this an eclipse? Why is it dark at noon? What happened to the sun? Is the world ending? What should I do? Beneath those questions lies the oldest human response to cosmic disruption. Not philosophical awe, but immediate survival. Find the children. Call your parents. Get indoors. Fill containers with water. Charge every device. Listen for instructions. In some households, there would be arguments within minutes. One person insisting it will pass, another insisting they must leave, another already crying because the body has understood something that reason still cannot phrase. In hospitals, care homes, nurseries, prisons, airports, and ships at sea, the event would take on special forms of pressure. These are places where movement is constrained, where responsibility is heavy, where people cannot simply decide to go home and shut the door. Nurses would calm patients while trying to understand their own fear. Air traffic controllers would speak steadily to pilots who are flying beneath a noon sky turned stellar and black. Crews at sea would stand on decks looking upward at a universe that seems far too near. In prisons, rumors could move faster than facts. In care homes, some elderly people might compare the darkness to war, while others would find no memory large enough to hold it. The first official statements from governments would likely arrive with a dangerous mixture of caution and inadequacy. Leaders do not like speaking before they understand a crisis, but silence during a global anomaly creates its own terror. Some would ask citizens to remain calm and conserve energy. Some would urge people to stay where they are. Some would mobilize emergency systems without yet knowing what the emergency actually requires. Scientific agencies would be forced into public language much sooner than they would prefer. And somewhere, perhaps very quickly, someone with enough authority would have to acknowledge the truth in plain words. The sun is no longer observable, and the implications are unprecedented. That sentence would divide the first phase of the event from the second. Before it, people are trying to identify what they are seeing. After it, they begin trying to survive what they have understood. The emotional quality changes.
Confusion becomes dread. Dread becomes calculation. A parent no longer asks whether the darkness is real. A parent asks how long food will keep, whether the heating will work, whether the roads will remain open, whether schools are releasing children, whether the water system depends on stable power. The world contracts around concrete questions because concrete questions are easier to hold than a cosmic one. And still, in that early span, the Earth remains physically inhabitable enough to deepen the horror.
Streets do not instantly freeze solid. Oceans do not turn to glass. Trees do not crack open in a single cinematic wave. Real planetary systems have inertia, and that inertia gives the disaster shape. The atmosphere retains heat. The upper layers of the ocean go on releasing stored energy. Buildings trap warmth. Subway tunnels and basements feel much as they did an hour earlier. This means the crisis expands through knowledge faster than through temperature. People are frightened not only by what is happening, but by what they know must come next. If you were standing on a city street at that moment, you might notice how sound changes under collective fear. Not simply louder, different. Sirens begin earlier than usual because emergency vehicles are dispatched into uncertainty. Car horns burst out from intersections where people have stopped paying attention to lanes and signals. Helicopters rise, though in some places they would soon be grounded or redirected. But between those sharp sounds, there might be pockets of astonishing quiet, a crowd looking up without speaking, a park gone still, a bus full of people staring at their screens in a shared hush. Catastrophe is often remembered as noise. In truth, some of its most powerful moments are silent. The psychological dislocation would also be intensified by clocks. Every device around you would still insist it is midday or early afternoon. The timekeeping systems of human civilization would continue with absolute confidence, but time, as lived by the body, would be breaking. Circadian expectation is not intellectual, it is hormonal, neural, ancient. The light that tells the body what phase of the day it inhabits would be gone. Even before temperature becomes a crisis, the body begins registering contradiction. Wakefulness under stars, dark lunch hours, school children asking whether it is night, office workers standing beside illuminated elevators while their nervous systems whisper that something fundamental in the order of the world has failed. There would also be the question of trust. In any crisis, people look for the dependable layers beneath ordinary life: science, infrastructure, government, local community, family. A disaster involving the sun presses on all of them at once. Science can describe, but not remedy, the absence of a star. Infrastructure can respond, but only within limits built for lesser emergencies. Governments can coordinate, but not reassure with real certainty. Communities can share food, light, transport, and shelter, but not explanations. Family can offer closeness, which in moments like this may matter more than accuracy. Yet even love cannot answer the size of the sky. Among scientists themselves, the realization would be severe and fast. Once solar observatories, radiometers, space weather stations, and astronomy networks converged on the same impossible absence, the event would no longer be a matter of interpretation. What would remain uncertain is the duration: a few minutes, hours, forever. And because duration determines everything, this uncertainty would act like a second disaster layered over the first. The response to 1 hour without the sun is not the response to a week. The response to a week is not the response to permanence. Planners would be forced to think in branching futures while still stumbling through the first. The body of the Earth would by now be beginning its long release of stored heat into space. This is not something you would see directly. You would experience it first as a subtle correction in the air. The warmth of surfaces would fade. Pavement that had held sunlight would no longer do so. Breezes would begin to lose the character of daytime convection. In places that had been hot, the relief would feel brief and strange, because cooling without sunset is not comfort. In colder climates, the edge would sharpen more quickly. Yet the overall change in the first hour would still be less dramatic than popular.
Imagination expects. The real terror remains anticipation. Because the sun is not only light, but also gravitational center, another consequence would already have occurred at the same moment the last sunlight vanished. Earth would cease orbiting the absent star and continue moving through space along the tangent of its former path. This would not be felt as a lurch. There is no cosmic hand shoving the planet sideways. Motion in space does not announce itself that way. Life on the surface would go on under the same gravity of Earth itself, with the same atmosphere, the same oceans, the same mountains. But the fact of that change would matter profoundly once scientists understood it, because it would tell them that even if warmth and power could be managed for a while, the architecture of the solar system had been broken. That knowledge would not yet dominate public awareness. It takes time for scientific hierarchy to filter into human feeling. Most people in the first hour would still be preoccupied by the darkness, by family, by transport, by communication, by the immediate condition of the world around them. But in research institutions, military briefing rooms, and emergency councils, the orbital implication would begin reshaping every conversation. This is no longer merely a solar blackout. It is a total rearrangement of planetary destiny. Still, the streets and homes of the world would remain the real theater of the moment. A child might ask whether the sun has gone to sleep. An adult might answer too quickly, because adults often lie gently while they are still deciding whether they themselves believe the truth. In apartments, curtains would be drawn for comfort, even though there is no daylight left to block. In supermarkets, carts would fill with bottled water, batteries, canned goods, blankets, infant formula, medicines, and all the objects people reach for when the future loses shape. In neighborhoods with strong social ties, people would begin checking on one another. In others, doors would close. Some cities would seem to hold together almost gracefully for a while. Public transit keeps moving. Emergency broadcasts remain measured. Police direct traffic under floodlit intersections. Cafes give away hot coffee before supplies run low. Hotel lobbies become waiting rooms. But even in the best organized places, a thin crack would be spreading through ordinary behavior. Schedules would cease meaning what they meant that morning. Deliveries would be delayed. Schools would make emergency decisions. Workplaces would send people home or fail to send them anywhere at all. The grammar of the day, built around morning, afternoon, commute, evening, dinner, would begin to dissolve. In rural regions, the event might acquire a different emotional texture. Without the buffering noise of dense urban systems, the absence of the sun could feel more intimate and more ancient. Farmers would stand beneath a star field where blue sky should be. Forest edges would deepen into black. Distant roads would go quiet. Livestock might crowd fences or move toward barns. In open country, the cosmic scale of the event would be more visible. In cities, the darkness would reflect from glass and pavement and electric light. In the countryside, it would reveal the true depth of the surrounding universe. Then there is the sea. On open water, especially far from shore, the disappearance of the sun would be among the most disorienting experiences imaginable. Mariners are used to darkness, but not to a night that falls at noon without a horizon of sunset, without the rhythm of celestial navigation, without the trusted sequence of the day. Ships would turn on every working light. Crews would gather on decks and bridges, looking upward at stars that should not yet be visible,
aware that the ocean beneath them stores warmth and motion and danger in ways land dwellers often forget. The sea would continue to heave and breathe under the blackened sky, indifferent but transformed. Commercial aviation, too, would enter a realm beyond routine emergency. Pilots train for systems failures, violent weather, decompression, instrument problems, engine fires, even volcanic ash. They do not train for the disappearance of the sun. Aircraft already airborne would keep flying because engines do not need sunlight. Instruments would still work if their systems remained powered, but the visual environment would be wrong in a way that no simulator normally provides.
A midday atmosphere abruptly deprived of sunlight would alter horizon cues, cloud appearance, and pilot perception. Air traffic systems would have to decide whether to ground departures, reroute arrivals, or prioritize fuel, and they would have to do it while the entire globe asked the same question at once. The longer the first hour continued, the more impossible it would become to preserve the fantasy of local explanation. The event would now be undeniably planetary, and because it is planetary, it would reach into every human imagination differently. Some would interpret it as punishment, some as proof, some as attack, some as a scientific mystery, some as the first sign of final collapse. The factual condition of the world would be the same. The human meanings attached to it would multiply instantly. This is one of the reasons global crises are so complex. They are never experienced only physically. They are filtered through belief, memory, and fear. Yet, beneath all interpretation, the underlying science would remain stark. No sunlight is arriving. No new solar energy is entering the Earth's system. The air still feels survivable because it remembers the sun, not because the sun is somehow near. Every warm surface around you is spending stored wealth. That is what heat becomes in this scenario, a savings account the planet did not know it would need. Oceans, especially, would act as reservoirs of that wealth. Land would cool faster. Thin air over deserts and continents would begin shifting sooner than the deeper thermal mass of water. Scientists would understand this quickly. Ordinary people would feel it slowly. And because people would feel it slowly, many would try to continue doing normal things for longer than seems rational in hindsight. That is another constant of disaster. When reality changes abruptly, behavior lags. Some restaurants would remain open for a while. Offices would continue meetings until they could not pretend anymore. Exercise classes might still finish their hour under emergency lighting. There would be weddings interrupted, exams abandoned, freight trains proceeding until a command came through, live broadcasts continuing because stopping them would concede too much. The first hour would be filled with these small residues of habit, each one moving through a world that has already ceased to be the world it was built for. At a deeper level, what terrifies in this first passage of time is not yet death, but derangement. The relationship between cause and effect has been violated in plain sight. Noon no longer guarantees light. Looking up no longer reveals a governing sun. Human beings can survive immense stress when the world still feels lawfully organized. What they struggle with is the collapse of background certainty. If the sun can disappear, what else that seemed permanent might vanish? The question is larger than astronomy. It reaches into the foundations of trust itself. As the first hour nears its end, the global mood would likely begin separating into layers. One layer is practical action, charging devices,
gathering supplies, locating loved ones, listening for instructions, conserving fuel, stabilizing transport. Another is administrative response, emergency meetings, scientific advisories, security preparations, hospital protocols, power management. Another is emotional and symbolic, prayer circles, silent crowds, live streams of the black sky, children held closer than usual, people writing messages they are not sure anyone will read later. Catastrophe creates bureaucracy and intimacy at the same time. If you were still outside by then, you might notice that faces look different under such light. Not merely darker, unmoored. Human features are shaped by what illuminates them. We are used to the angles of sun and shade. Under artificial lamps against a noon sky gone black, the face of another person would seem both too near and somehow estranged, as though the world had moved one layer away from everything familiar. This is why the first hour would not simply be frightening in a practical sense. It would be uncanny in the deepest meaning of the word. Home would remain home, but no longer feel fully inhabited by the world you know. And still, there would be no easy bodily evidence that the worst physical consequences had begun. That tension would keep tightening. Everyone could feel that something irreversible had happened, yet the streets were still there. The buildings still stood.
The air could still be breathed. The oceans had not frozen. The forests had not fallen silent altogether. This gap between visible catastrophe and delayed material collapse would make the imagination do much of the damage. Human beings are skilled at fearing the future, especially when the future has been placed only hours away. Museums and universities would become curious islands during this interval. In museums, visitors who had come to look at fossils, meteorites, and paintings of old disasters would suddenly find themselves inside a new one. In universities, laboratories devoted to climate, astrophysics, and geophysics would be thrust into a role both privileged and helpless. They would understand more quickly than the average citizen what the disappearance implied, yet that extra understanding would not provide calm. Often it would do the opposite. Knowing a little more would mean seeing farther into the consequences. A geophysicist would know that the atmosphere and oceans buy time, but only time. An astronomer would know that orbital mechanics do not pause out of kindness. A biologist would know how dependent almost every food web is on the daily return of light. Some people would begin to look for signs in places where signs have always seemed to live. Telescope enthusiasts would set up equipment in gardens and on balconies, hoping to capture the sky, hoping perhaps for some clue hidden from the naked eye. Religious buildings would fill in certain cities, not because doctrine contains a procedure for missing stars, but because sanctuaries offer one of the oldest human technologies for enduring powerlessness. In other places, bars would fill instead. Not everyone seeks transcendence under stress. Some seek noise, company, and the dulling comfort of rituals already at hand. Catastrophe reveals not one human nature, but many. Schools would face a nearly impossible emotional task. Teachers are trained to manage fear in small doses. Storms, lockdown drills, sudden illness, the ordinary interruptions of a difficult world. This would be something else. Children, especially younger ones, tend to ask direct questions at the exact moment adults are least able to answer them. Why did the sun go away? When is it coming back? Is it night forever? Are we going to die?
The most honest answers would be incomplete, and incompleteness is hard to give a child with a steady voice. Yet many teachers would do what people have always done for the young in times of uncertainty. They would simplify the world without lying too much. They would keep routines where they could. They would turn on lights, gather students close, pass out water, call families, and make their own bodies a kind of temporary shelter. There would also be those who refused the event for longer than others, not out of ignorance, but out of the mind's need to stagger its acceptance. Even as scientific agencies moved toward direct statements, some people would continue insisting that an explanation smaller than the truth must exist. Mass equipment failure, atmospheric weaponry, a rare celestial alignment no one predicted. This resistance is not irrational in the simple sense. It is often a protective mechanism. The full reality of a vanished sun is so vast that the brain searches for narrower doors through which to pass. Only gradually does it accept the larger room. The commerce of reassurance would also begin almost immediately. Experts with no expertise would promise answers. Strangers would circulate instructions of every kind, from useful advice about preserving battery life to dangerous fantasies about secret bunkers, hidden causes, or magical timelines for the sun's return. In any modern emergency, information and misinformation bloom together because both satisfy the same hunger, the desire for a pattern. Yet, over time, the physical world disciplines belief. The sky remains black. The sun does not reappear after 5 minutes, or 10, or 30. Reality keeps pressing. Even the most inventive rumor must eventually confront the evidence outside the window. By the end of that first hour, a subtle rearrangement would have taken place inside millions of minds. The event would no longer feel like an interruption. It would feel like a condition. That psychological shift matters. An interruption is something one waits out. A condition is something one begins to live within. Once people crossed that inner threshold, the questions around them would change in tone.
No longer, what is this? More often, how cold will it get? How long can power hold? What happens to flights, to crops, to hospitals, to water, to cities after dark that came before afternoon had even ended? The fear would become more practical and, therefore, in some ways, more mature. Soon enough, attention would shift from the impossible sky to the cooling world beneath it, from darkness itself to what darkness would start doing to water, soil, machines, food, and flesh. The first astonishment would give way to a colder kind of thought, and the planet, still carrying its old warmth for the moment, would begin the long process of spending it. The first signs of that spending would be almost modest. A hand placed on sun-warmed stone would find it less generous than it should be. Metal railings that had felt hot under daylight would begin surrendering their heat into the strange noon night. Rooftops, parking lots, fields, and empty roads would all start radiating energy upward toward a sky no longer refreshed by sunlight. You would not watch the planet become an ice sphere in a theatrical instant. You would watch warmth lose confidence. That is the important distinction. Earth is not a thin shell that depends only on whatever light falls on it in that exact moment. It is a deep thermal reservoir, layered and uneven. The oceans hold enormous quantities of heat. Soil and rock carry the memory of previous days. Buildings, especially in great cities, trap and release warmth with slow persistence. Even the lower atmosphere stores energy accumulated through countless exchanges between sea, land, air, cloud, and sunlight. When the sun disappears, all of those exchanges are disrupted, but not erased. The machine does not shatter at once. It winds down. If you were moving through a city a few hours into that dayless day, you might begin to notice that the cold arrives first not as pain, but as correction. The temperature that should have risen through the afternoon instead stalls, then gently turns. Offices that depend on glass and sun exposure lose their passive warmth. Apartment interiors begin to cool from windows inward. In open squares and along waterfronts, the air develops a sharper edge. People who left home in light jackets or shirt sleeves would start pulling collars closed, wrapping arms around themselves, or ducking into buildings not only for shelter from fear, but for shelter from the first genuine physical change. Climate scientists often speak of thermal inertia, and in ordinary life, the phrase sounds abstract. Here, it becomes intimate. It is the reason the world remains livable long enough for every mind on Earth to fully understand its danger. Water changes temperature more slowly than land. Air near the surface is influenced by what lies beneath it. Cloud cover, humidity, wind, local geography, and season all shape how quickly cooling is felt. A desert plateau would not behave like a humid coastline. A dense city would not cool like an open plain. A tropical sea would hold its warmth far longer than a mountain valley in winter. The catastrophe would be universal, but the pace of its touch would be local. This unevenness would matter immediately. In some equatorial places, the first several hours might feel eerily survivable. People would be frightened, but not yet freezing. In temperate zones, especially where it had already been a cool season, the descent would feel quicker and more personal. In polar and subpolar regions, where sunlight itself is already a precious margin against severity, the emotional significance of losing it would be immense, even before measurements fully changed. The psychology of the event would therefore vary with latitude. Fear in a warm coastal city would not sound quite like fear in a darkening northern town where everyone knows how much the body depends on heat. Even so, no place would remain normal. A hot afternoon without sunlight is not merely a cooler afternoon. It is a breach in expectation. Farmers would watch crops beneath a black sky that offers no promise of return. Fishermen would work under artificial light while knowing that the sea beneath them is still warm only because it has not yet had time to forget the sun. Children would ask whether school will happen tomorrow. Adults would answer in ways that betray their own uncertainty. The body can tolerate many conditions if it understands the pattern. Here, the pattern is gone. You can imagine the first official temperature maps that begin circulating on screens across the world. Under ordinary circumstances, such maps show familiar gradients driven by day and night, geography, and season. Now they would show a planet whose daytime heating has ceased everywhere at once. Meteorologists and climate modelers would explain, as calmly as possible, that surface temperatures would begin to fall, but not uniformly and not instantly to lethal extremes. Their careful phrasing would sound almost gentle compared to the images in people's heads. Many listeners, primed by films and nightmares, would expect immediate freezing. The truth is both kinder in the first hours and crueler in the long run. The atmosphere and oceans buy time, but time is not rescue. Time is simply a longer corridor in which to hear what the disaster means. Outside major buildings, ventilation systems would continue pushing air. Power stations would keep operating where fuel, maintenance, and grid stability allow. Subways would still move beneath the ground in some cities, carrying passengers through tunnels that remain comparatively warm. Cafes, transit halls, hospital corridors, and underground shopping passages would become little climates of denial, warm enough for people to imagine that maybe the crisis is still mostly in the sky. But the sky governs more than light. It governs energy balance. Slowly, relentlessly, the indoors would begin to feel borrowed too. The night sky above, if clouds broke, would remain one of the deepest shocks. The stars, visible in daytime darkness, would not simply reassure people with their beauty. They would sharpen the sense that Earth has been exposed. Under normal daylight, the atmosphere hides the wider universe behind scattered blue brightness. Without the sun, that veil collapses. In some places, planets would gleam. Bright stars would puncture the wrong hour. The moon, depending on its phase and position, might become a major object of attention, a pale companion suddenly promoted by the absence of the sovereign light. But even the moon would now be changed in human meaning. It shines only by reflected sunlight. If it remained visible, it would do so as a delayed mirror of a vanished source, a quiet reminder that the disaster is being read not only on Earth, but across every reflective body in the neighborhood of the missing star. At the same time, much of the world would not be staring at clear heavens. It would be looking up through weather. Clouds would persist. Storm systems already in motion would not instantly vanish. Rain, already suspended in a weather front, would still fall. Winds, driven by earlier contrasts in heating, would continue for a while. The atmosphere has momentum. It does not ask permission from a changed sky before continuing what it had already begun. That, too, would be unsettling. Human beings tend to associate great cosmic disturbances with immediate dramatic changes in weather, but the real planet would carry on its established motions for some time. A storm crossing a continent when the sun disappeared would continue to cross that continent. Ocean swells raised by far-off winds would keep traveling. Snow would still fall where it had already been set in motion by atmospheric conditions. The world would not stop. It would continue on an increasingly impossible budget. In forests, the event would unfold through gradients of silence and mistaken timing. Tree canopies that had been carrying sunlight down to ferns, moss, insects, and nesting birds would suddenly stop transmitting that daily signal. Some species that use dusk as a cue to sing, hunt, fold leaves, open flowers, or retreat into bark would respond as though evening had arrived. Others rely not only on light, but also on temperature, humidity, and the social behavior of neighboring organisms. Because those cues would now be out of alignment, the forest would not simply become nocturnal, it would become uncertain. That uncertainty is an ecological state in its own right. A chorus that usually rises at dusk might begin and then fail. Pollinators might withdraw, while certain night insects emerge too early into conditions that do not match the rest of the system. The forest floor would hold the day's warmth a little while longer, but the canopy above would already belong to a different sky. Freshwater systems would tell a related story.
Lakes, rivers, reservoirs, and wetlands respond quickly to changes in air temperature and light, though each
its own scale. Surface waters in small ponds would cool sooner than deep reservoirs. Streams descending from snowfields or glaciers would continue running, carrying cold memory from higher ground. Fish that orient by light and temperature could alter their depth or feeding behavior. Aquatic plants in shallow water would lose their photosynthetic drive, just as terrestrial plants do, and dissolved oxygen patterns could begin shifting if darkness persisted. Again, one day would not empty rivers of life, but it would interrupt the ordinary chemistry and behavior that make freshwater ecosystems feel stable. To anyone standing on a riverbank under the wrong stars, the water would still move as always, yet the processes within it would already be diverging from expectation. There would also be scientific instruments quietly recording the event in ways no human senses can. Flux towers measuring exchanges of carbon, water vapor, and heat between ecosystems and the atmosphere would show a sharp break in their daily curves. Solar observatories, if still operating, would register absence where signal should be overwhelming. Weather balloons launched into the dark would rise through an atmosphere beginning to cool from below in unusual patterns. Ocean buoys would continue transmitting temperatures, winds, and wave data, allowing scientists to watch the world spend its stored energy hour by hour. Seismometers would not detect the disappearance directly, because the event is not an earthquake, yet observatories of many kinds would become witnesses to a truth larger than any one field. Earth science would suddenly feel less like a set of specialties and more like a single, long conversation about dependence. Season would shape the human experience as powerfully as geography. A missing sun in midsummer at high northern latitudes would feel different from a missing sun in midwinter, not because the cosmic fact changes, but because the margin of survivability is different. In summer, land and water begin from greater warmth, agriculture is further along, and heating systems may be under less strain. In winter, many regions already rely on fuel, insulation, and careful timing to remain comfortable. The same interruption, therefore, lands on different starting conditions. This is one reason disaster planning always begins with context. There is no such thing as a purely global experience. A single physical event becomes many human events once it enters the variety of climates, infrastructures, and seasons through which people live. This persistence would create eerie scenes, lightning over a city already plunged into cosmic darkness, rain sweeping through a black noon where streetlights burn, fog along a river while stars appear overhead through gaps in cloud, snow in regions where snow had already been forecast, falling not out of a gray winter sky, but into a darkness that no winter day has ever known. In some places, ordinary weather would almost insult the event by continuing. In others, the absence of sunlight would render familiar weather newly alien. Meteorology under a missing sun becomes an exercise in inertia and decay. The heating differences between equator and poles, between land and sea, between dayside and nightside, are major drivers of atmospheric circulation, but not the only structure in motion. Pressure systems, already built into the air mass, would go on evolving, though deprived of fresh energy input. In the first day, the atmosphere would still remember the previous one. Clouds do not disappear because the sun does. Humidity does not evaporate away by decree. The great engines of weather would begin to weaken and change, but the first hours would be marked by persistence.
Storms would be ghosts of the old world, still walking because they had already taken form. The oceans, meanwhile, would become central characters in the story, whether people realized it or not. They cover most of the planet and contain most of the accessible heat near the surface. Their upper layers, especially in lower latitudes, would release warmth slowly compared with land. This means coastal climates would resist immediate extremes more effectively than continental interiors. People near warm seas might find that the darkness is far more severe psychologically than physically during the first day. Inland areas, particularly dry and elevated ones, would feel the cooling more quickly. The old contrast between land and sea would sharpen human
awareness of just how much the water has always been doing in silence. Marine biologists and oceanographers would understand something that the broader public might only sense dimly. The sea is not merely a place where heat is stored. It is a regulator of climate and a conveyor of energy through currents, evaporation, and exchange with the air. Without the sun, photosynthesis in the surface ocean would halt almost immediately. Phytoplankton, the microscopic organisms that form the base of many marine food webs and produce a substantial portion of Earth's oxygen over time, would stop harvesting light. They would not all die in a day, but their great invisible labor would pause. A planetary process that normally runs with such continuity we mistake it for background would simply cease. That pause would not announce itself with drama to ordinary observers on beaches or ships. No banner would rise from the sea saying, "The chemistry of life has entered suspension." But science would know. Sensors on buoys, ships, and satellites would show the loss of incoming solar radiation. Ocean color monitoring systems, if still functioning, would eventually record changes in productivity if the darkness lasted. The first day would not starve the ocean. It would do something subtler and perhaps more haunting. It would interrupt the daily pulse of a global biological engine, as if the ocean had taken one breath and then failed to complete the next. Along coastlines, the practical consequences would mingle with that deeper biological stillness. Ports rely on power, communication, schedules, and confidence. Fishing fleets, cargo operations, ferries, and harbor pilots all depend on an understood world. Under continuous darkness, with rumors flying and global navigation systems under stress from wider disruptions, maritime authorities would begin slowing or suspending activity where they could. Container terminals lit by floodlights would look like islands of stubborn order. Yet every crate, every crane movement, every ship waiting offshore would belong to a logistics system designed around a planet with a sun. The dependency would become visible through delay. On land, agriculture would enter a strange kind of emergency. A single day without sunlight would not destroy all crops, but it would interrupt photosynthesis everywhere. Greenhouses might keep some plants warm under artificial conditions if energy allowed, though light itself, on an agricultural scale, is not easily replaced. Farmers and agricultural scientists would think immediately in terms of duration. One day is shock. Several days becomes crisis. Longer than that begins to edge toward systemic collapse. But even within the first day, livestock would need care, automated systems would need power, milking and feeding schedules would be disrupted, and cold stress in animals could begin, depending on region. What disappears with the sun is not only growth, it is rhythm. Cities often imagine themselves more independent from nature than they are. That illusion would not survive the first long, dark afternoon.
Urban life depends on electricity, transport, heating and cooling, water distribution, food supply chains, digital communication, emergency response, and millions of human decisions made inside a framework of predictable time. Remove the sun, and the framework warps. Office towers that seem sealed against the seasons would still lean on outside energy and stable grids. Hospitals with backup generators would still depend on fuel deliveries and coordinated labor. Apartment residents with full refrigerators would still rely on the systems behind the wall. A city is not a fortress against planetary change. It is a concentrated expression of planetary dependence. Grid operators would probably become some of the most important people on Earth in those first hours. The disappearance of solar generation is only the beginning. Demand for lighting would surge. In some regions, heating demand would begin rising as temperatures fell. Public anxiety would drive heavier use of communication networks, charging, refrigeration checks, and emergency infrastructure. Electrical systems are balanced delicately between supply and demand. They are built to handle contingencies, but not the simultaneous shock of global darkness and mass human reaction. Some grids would hold remarkably well. Others, especially where infrastructure was already fragile, could begin failing in patches. That patchiness would
shape the emotional geography of the catastrophe. One neighborhood remains lit, another drops into darkness. One hospital continues on generator power, another struggles with fuel or overload. Some rural communities that have local resilience, wood heat, stored food, or smaller populations might feel strangely calm compared with dense urban districts where millions depend on uninterrupted systems. Yet resilience is complicated. A rural family with a stove and water tank might be secure for a while, but isolated from medical help. A city block with reliable power might still be vulnerable to crowding, panic, or supply interruption. The event would not sort places neatly into safe and unsafe. It would produce a patchwork of temporary advantages. Transportation systems would reveal how much human mobility depends on expectation. Rail lines could continue if power and control systems held, but schedules would fail under uncertainty. Roads would clog where fear sends everyone moving at once. Fuel stations would face surges. Aviation would be constrained by broader air traffic decisions, fuel logistics, staffing, and the need to keep runway and navigation systems stable. Ports would slow. Warehouses would prioritize. Courier networks would miss their windows. The failure would not be instantaneous collapse, but a spreading stiffness, as if the global body had lost flexibility. Goods would still move. They would simply move inside a widening field of doubt. Water systems would become another quiet center of concern. In developed regions, municipal water usually arrives with such regularity that its absence feels almost unthinkable. Yet pumping, treatment, pressure management, and distribution all depend on energy, staffing, and system integrity. People hearing conflicting reports about power reliability would begin filling sinks, tubs, bottles, and pots. This behavior is rational enough, but large-scale shifts in demand can stress already strained systems. Wastewater treatment, too, requires continuity. Civilization is full of unseen circulations that work beautifully until they are asked to continue under cosmic conditions. In the financial world, the disappearance of the sun would create a different kind of weather. Markets rely on communication, confidence, and assumptions about continuity. A day without the sun is not merely bad news, it is the invalidation of every model built on normal time.
Trading might be halted in many places if systems remain functional enough to halt it deliberately. Banks would face surges in withdrawals. Digital payment systems would come under pressure if communications flickered. Yet even money would begin to feel strangely secondary beside heat, water, medicine, and information. One of the lessons of planetary dependency is that abstraction shrinks quickly when energy itself feels uncertain. Despite all this, there would also be remarkable examples of coordination and calm. Humans are not only creatures of panic, they are creatures of organization. Emergency agencies would share data across borders. Scientists in different countries would collaborate with unusual speed. Neighborhood groups would check on the elderly. People with generators would share access. Restaurants might cook through perishable stock for communities before refrigeration becomes risky. Public buildings could become warming centers if conditions required. Volunteers would emerge. The first day would contain both selfishness and generosity, fear and practical tenderness. Disaster does not erase character, it reveals it under unfamiliar light. The animal world would continue to respond in ways both obvious and subtle. Birds are often among the most visible indicators because they track light, temperature, and social cues with exquisite sensitivity. In some regions, they might attempt to roost early, only to be disrupted by the unnatural duration of the darkness. Nocturnal species could emerge, but their emergence would be mismatched with other environmental signals. Predators and prey alike would find themselves moving through a world whose timing has slipped. Artificial light in urban areas would create islands of false continuity, drawing insects, confusing migratory routes, and altering interactions. Rural darkness, by contrast, would be deeper and more absolute, perhaps encouraging different behaviors. Biologists studying circadian rhythms have long known that life is full of clocks. What would happen here is not the stopping of those clocks at once, but their sudden disagreement with the world around them. Plants would experience the event without emotion, but not without consequence. Photosynthesis would halt because there is no light to drive it. Stomata, the microscopic openings through which plants exchange gases, respond to light and other factors. Plant metabolism shifts between day and night states in ways that are now well studied. A single day without sunlight would not kill most established plants, but it would matter. It would be a missed pulse, a skipped turn in a process that normally repeats with astonishing reliability. In green landscapes, the leaves would still be there, the fields still spread beneath the darkness, yet their great conversion of light into life would be paused everywhere at once. A forest would look unchanged and already be changed. This interruption extends into the invisible chemistry of the atmosphere. In normal daylight, sunlight drives photochemical reactions, including those that influence ozone formation near the surface and other aspects of atmospheric composition. The exact short-term effects would vary with conditions and would be the subject of intense study if instrumentation remained available. What matters for the human imagination is that the sun is not simply a source of illumination and warmth. It is an active participant in atmospheric chemistry. Remove it, and the air becomes not only darker, but different in process. The more science examined the missing day, the more layers of ordinary dependence it would uncover. Inside homes, sleep would become its own battlefield. Darkness cues melatonin production and signals the body toward rest. Yet fear, noise, stress hormones, and practical demands would push in the opposite direction. Many people would feel exhausted without being able to sleep. Others might fall asleep briefly out of emotional overload and wake disoriented, unsure whether minutes or hours had passed in the continuous dark. Parents would struggle to settle children. Shift workers would lose the reference points that help structure their labor. Hospitals and emergency responders, already accustomed to round-the-clock work, would face a generalized version of the internal dislocation they know so well, only now it would be planetary. This matters because human judgment degrades under stress and sleep disruption. A single, long, dark day would not only chill the world, it would subtly impair decision-making, just as the need for sound decisions rises. Traffic accidents could increase, communication errors might multiply, rumors become more persuasive when people are frightened and tired. The old bond between light and reason would suddenly feel less metaphorical. Civilized behavior depends on institutions, but institutions are inhabited by bodies, and bodies are creatures of rhythm. When rhythm is broken, even before true cold becomes lethal, the mind begins to fray at the edges. Researchers who study ecosystems would likely be among those most haunted by the event's quietest consequences. Large animals are visible, power failures are measurable, but ecosystems are built from layered dependencies, often invisible to non-specialists. Pollinators following light cues, plankton migrating vertically in the oceans in response to day and night, microbial communities changing their metabolic balance, leaf surfaces cooling, predators shifting activity patterns, prey losing the timing that once protected them. All of these small adjustments form the fine texture of a living planet. One dark day is not total collapse, yet it is a global disturbance of timing so complete that every ecological system would register it somehow. There is a temptation in imagining such a scenario to think mainly of dramatic extinction, but life is often disrupted before it is destroyed. The first day without the sun would be an immense lesson in interruption. Photosynthesis paused, circadian rhythms confused, atmospheric heating halted, demand patterns broken, transport delayed, communication overloaded, weather continuing without fresh input, marine productivity suspended. The beauty and terror of the situation lies in how many systems can continue, briefly, on memory alone. Earth would reveal itself not as fragile in the simple sense, but as a densely buffered world that can absorb a shocking blow while still broadcasting the fact of the blow through every layer. As hours accumulate, the thermal
differences between environments would become more obvious. Open land, especially dry terrain, would lose heat faster than the sea. Snow-covered regions would reflect what little residual light there is from the moon or stars, creating vast, dim surfaces that feel colder even before measurements become extreme. Tropical forests, dense and humid, would release their stored heat slowly, yet the absence of insect choruses or bird patterns at expected times might make them feel haunted in a different way. Great deserts would become especially severe after initial cooling, because the same conditions that allow rapid heating under the sun also allow rapid heat loss when radiation to space continues unbalanced. Mountain valleys would trap cold air. Coastal zones would remain moderated for longer. The first day would teach the world more geography than many people had ever wanted to know. Food systems would already be shifting toward emergency logic. Refrigerated warehouses would check backup power. Grocery stores would sell through essentials rapidly. Trucks delayed by road congestion or fuel anxiety would miss delivery windows.
restaurants and households would make quick decisions about perishables. In the short term, the actual quantity of food on Earth would not vanish. The problem would be distribution, refrigeration, transport, confidence, and the dawning realization that agriculture itself depends on a daily energy source now absent. Hunger would not yet be universal, but the future of food would become one of the first truly existential thoughts that ordinary people could grasp without scientific training. Communication networks would serve as both lifeline and amplifier of distress. The internet, phone systems, radio networks, satellite communication links, emergency broadcasts, messaging apps, all would be leaned on heavily. Information allows coordination, but it also allows synchronized panic. A rumor that might once have lived only within a town can now circle the planet in minutes. At the same time, scientists trying to explain thermal inertia, grid stability, atmospheric persistence, and the reality of Earth's changing trajectory would be forced into competition with speculation simple enough to spread faster. Calm explanation is usually slower than fear. During a planetary anomaly, that speed difference becomes one of the hidden hazards. Religious responses would vary enormously, but they would be widespread. The disappearance of the sun touches archetypes older than written history. For thousands of years, human cultures have understood the sun as God, eye, king, witness, clock, fire, ancestor, and guarantee. Even in secular societies, those associations have not vanished completely. Places of worship would fill, not always because doctrine offers clarity, but because ritual offers form when form is needed most. People would sing, kneel, weep, sit in silence, or simply remain near one another under dim lights. Others would reject all symbolic interpretation and cling more fiercely to technical briefings and measured forecasts. Both responses, in their own way, are attempts to live inside enormity without being crushed by it. The deep sea would preserve one of the strangest contrasts of all. Far below the surface, most life already exists without sunlight. Entire ecosystems around hydrothermal vents depend on chemical energy rather than photosynthesis. Creatures in the abyss live in darkness as a native state. Yet even there, the broader ocean system above them is linked in countless ways to the sun. Organic matter sinking from sunlit waters feeds deep communities. Surface temperature gradients help drive circulation patterns that influence the whole ocean. The abyss would not notice the missing day as a visible event, but it belongs to a planet whose energy economy has been altered. One of the humbling truths of Earth science is that nothing large stays isolated for long. On land, zoos, aquariums, and research facilities caring for animals would face unusually intimate dilemmas. Artificial environments are controlled, but only within the frame of a functioning civilization. Keepers would have to decide how to manage lighting, feeding, temperature, and stress. Some animals might be soothed by stable artificial conditions. Others would react strongly to the changed atmosphere around them. A nocturnal exhibit becomes normal, while the world outside becomes impossible. Tropical species in temperate cities become
dependent on uninterrupted energy. The event would reveal how many forms of life now survive in partnership with human systems. Meanwhile, the sky itself would continue to evolve in appearance as terrestrial light sources altered their relative importance. In heavily populated regions, artificial illumination would cast glows upward, producing halos beneath low cloud and making the dark sky less pristine than in remote areas. In deserts, on oceans, and in sparsely inhabited interiors, the cosmic view would be clearer and perhaps more unsettling. The Milky Way, in what should have been afternoon, bright planets hanging over familiar landmarks at the wrong hour, constellations usually reserved for night, now pressing against midday memory. Even people who know the sky well might feel estranged from it, because recognition depends on context. Orion, at 3 in the afternoon, is not Orion as anyone has learned to love it. It is evidence. As people settled into the dark, emergency planning would begin shifting from immediate shock to duration-based scenarios. What if the sun returns within hours? What if not before morning? What if not tomorrow? These questions would shape everything from fuel allocation to public messaging. But the first day would also force a quieter recognition. Even if the sun returned soon, the event had already shown that human civilization rests on assumptions so old and so stable that most people never think to name them. Day will follow night. Heat will enter the system each morning. Plants will make use of light. Weather will remain powered. The planet will continue its circuit around the star. Remove those assumptions, and modern life looks less like mastery and more like a delicate arrangement atop inherited regularities. Children born in cities often imagine night as a local condition, switched on by the sky and resisted by human light. What the first day without the sun would reveal is a darkness that cannot be domesticated so easily. Street lamps can illuminate pavements, headlights can cut roads, interiors can glow warmly for a while, but no amount of local brightness restores a daylight world. The outside remains cosmically altered. This distinction would press on the mind. Many people might choose to gather in the brightest places available, not because light solves the problem, but because it counters a deeper animal fear of being exposed to a dark beyond control. Shopping malls, stadium concourses, transit hubs, hotel lobbies, and public buildings could become temporary refuges of denial as much as of practicality. Yet, outside those refuges, the cooling Earth would go on releasing its stored warmth into space. Thermometers would tell the story more cleanly than human skin at first, but the skin would catch up. In many regions, by the later hours of that day, outdoor exposure would feel increasingly serious. The difference between sheltered and unsheltered conditions would sharpen. Wind would matter more. Dry air would take warmth faster. Clouds could either moderate radiative losses near the surface or deepen psychological gloom, depending on their structure. Specialists in building science, heating systems, and emergency shelter would become unexpectedly relevant voices. Under a missing sun, architecture itself becomes part of survival. All of these changes would still be happening within a world that remembers ordinary life. Food is still on shelves. Many homes are still heated. Hospitals still function. The atmosphere is still breathable. Oceans still move. Forests still stand. That is why the first day would not feel like instant apocalypse in the crude cinematic sense. It would feel like a slow revelation of dependency. With each hour, another layer of the familiar world would disclose what it had always been leaning on. First light, then temperature, then transport, then agriculture, then biology, then chemistry, then sleep, then confidence.
The catastrophe would move from the sky into systems, and from systems into understanding. And as that understanding deepened, some eyes would begin lifting beyond weather, beyond power lines, beyond cold fields and dim city blocks, toward a more frightening thought altogether. The darkness over Earth was only one symptom. Somewhere above the atmosphere, beyond the reach of clouds and sirens and human voices, the planet had already left the path it once took around its star, and sooner or later, that hidden change would have to be faced. Sooner or
later, the knowledge would settle into public language. Not everyone would understand the equations, and not everyone would need to. What mattered was the shape of the truth. When the sun vanished, Earth did not stop and wait beneath an empty place in the sky. It kept moving. For more than 4 billion years, our world has been falling around the sun in a great controlled curve, its speed always trying to carry it away, the sun's gravity always drawing it inward, the balance between those tendencies creating what we call an orbit. Remove the central mass, and the balance is gone. Earth would continue along the direction it was already traveling, not torn apart, not violently shaken, but released into a new path through the dark. That idea would arrive in human thought like a second eclipse inside the first. Until then, many people would still be living mainly inside the visible event, the darkness in the sky, the cooling streets, the failing schedules, the strange behavior of animals and crowds. But orbital change belongs to a colder scale. It means that the disaster is not only atmospheric or social, it is astronomical. The planet itself is no longer where it was supposed to be. And even if every lamp on Earth stayed bright, even if every home held its warmth a little longer, the foundation under all ordinary futures would already have shifted. If you were listening to a scientist explain it that day, the language might be gentle, but the meaning would not be. Earth would not feel the loss of the sun's gravity as a jolt, because orbit is not supported by some visible tether. Motion through space has no dramatic wind. The planet, the oceans, the atmosphere, the moon, and everything on the surface would all keep sharing the same forward motion they already had. That is why the streets did not crack open at the moment of loss, why mountains did not topple, why the air did not rush away. The catastrophe is not a collision, it is a release. Earth becomes, in effect, a world no longer circling its star, but traveling onward along the line of its former escape. In one sense, that might sound strangely less frightening than fire or impact. A planet quietly changing course in empty space lacks the violence that human fear usually expects. But in another sense, it is more terrible precisely because it is so quiet. It means there is no quick drama to survive and be done with. There is only the vast implication that every season, every sunrise, every harvest, every migration, every long inherited rhythm of the biosphere and climate belonged to a relationship now broken. The Earth does not merely miss the sun as a lamp, it misses the sun as anchor. Researchers would immediately begin asking what a single day in this condition really means. The answer, as with so much in planetary science, lies in timescales. In only 24 hours, Earth would not instantly become a frozen, dead world wandering the galaxy like a mythic ruin. The oceans would still hold enormous heat. The atmosphere would still cling to the planet. The moon, sharing Earth's motion at that instant, would continue nearby under the same altered circumstances. Life on the surface would remain threatened,
but not erased. Yet, a day is enough to make the direction of the problem unmistakable. A day without solar input is not a strange weather event. It is the beginning of a different physical story. That story would spread through public consciousness in uneven waves. Some people would hear the orbital explanation and barely react, because the practical crisis around them is closer and louder. A family gathered in an apartment around flashlights and bottled water is likely to care more about heat, medicine, and news than celestial mechanics. Yet others would feel something almost spiritual in the thought. For all of human history, the sky has been both distant and intimate, a place of symbols, calendars, gods, navigation, and wonder. To learn that the planet itself has slipped out of its ancient path would be to realize that the disaster has reached beneath every map, every season, every promise that spring follows winter, because it always has. There would also be the question of how the return of the sun, if it returned, would even work in such a scenario. Physics, properly speaking, does not offer a natural mechanism by which a star vanishes for a day and then resumes its role untouched. The premise is intentionally impossible. Yet, once the thought experiment is
Opened, scientists and ordinary listeners alike would still ask the same practical question. If the sun came back after 24 hours, what then? Would Earth simply resume its old orbit as if nothing had happened? Would the geometry be altered? Would the planet's trajectory be bent into some new curve? The exact answer would depend on how the disappearance and return occurred, and that is one of the points where speculation must remain honest. The world can reason about consequences, but not pin them down perfectly when the cause itself breaks natural law. Still, the exercise remains meaningful. Thought experiments are one of science's oldest tools. They are ways of discovering what hidden assumptions govern reality by imagining those assumptions removed. What if there were no friction? What if gravity behaved differently? What if Earth lost its star? Even when the trigger is unrealistic, the consequences reveal real dependencies. In this case, they reveal with painful clarity how much of our civilization, biology, climate, and psychology rests on a single, ordinary fact so reliable that it is almost never felt as a fact at all. Morning comes because a star continues to exist. By now, the length of the day itself would start to feel distorted. Hours in deep stress rarely move with ordinary grace. Sometimes they race, sometimes they expand. The missing sun would do something stranger. It would remove one of the most basic visual cues by which time is embodied. We do not merely read clocks. We feel time through changing light, through shadows lengthening, through the bright confidence of noon and the softer edges of evening. Without those transformations, and with every clock insisting that the day is still advancing, consciousness would become detached from its oldest scaffolding. People would ask what time it is and receive an answer that feels almost meaningless. In shelters, homes, and public buildings, this distortion would alter behavior in subtle ways. Meals might be taken out of habit rather than hunger. Children might need to be told when it is afternoon because their bodies no longer trust the evidence around them. Workers on emergency shifts would feel more detached than usual from their own fatigue. Some would drift into exhausted half-sleep beneath fluorescent lighting, only to wake into the same darkness outside and feel that almost no time had passed. In hospitals and command centers, the pressure of continuous crisis would further flatten the distinction between hour and hour. The longest day in human history would not only be long by the clock, it would be long inside perception. The world's political and institutional order
would also be entering a new phase by then. Early statements of reassurance would be giving way to more serious directives. Governments, energy operators, military organizations, space agencies, scientific academies, and local authorities would all be speaking into the same global uncertainty. Borders still exist in such a moment, but the sky above them does not respect those lines. Every administration would have its own resources, its own style of communication, its own capacity for order, but none could honestly claim mastery over the cause of the crisis. That shared helplessness might foster unusual cooperation in some places and defensive secrecy in others. International scientific cooperation, especially, would become one of the few genuinely global languages left. Astronomers, physicists, geophysicists, climate scientists, engineers, and medical planners would exchange data with extraordinary speed. Even where politics interfered, the laws of nature would still be common ground. Instruments in one country would confirm readings from another. Thermal models would be updated with real-world observations. Grid operators would learn from distant failures and successes. Ocean buoys, weather stations, and satellite systems, where still available, would feed into the same dark map of a planet spending itself. Knowledge would not solve the event, but it would soften chaos where it could. At the level of individual lives, though, the day would increasingly become a test of waiting. Action has an immediate dignity. Fill the containers, check the neighbors, charge the radios, gather blankets, cook what will spoil. But eventually, beyond the first rush of useful movement, there is little left to do except listen, conserve, and wait. That may be the hardest part for the human nervous
system. We are built to respond to danger with motion, yet many of the dangers in a starless day unfold on scales too large and too slow for direct confrontation. You cannot bargain with planetary heat loss. You cannot sprint back into an orbit. You can only inhabit the hours while larger processes continue around you. In cities, that waiting would acquire a special texture after the first frenzy. Streets that were chaotic earlier might quiet as fuel is saved, curfews imposed, or sheer uncertainty keeps people indoors. Tall buildings would remain lit in some districts, dark in others, producing skylines that look wounded rather than simply illuminated. Emergency vehicles would still move, but the background noise of normal commerce might fade. No lunchtime crowds, no office exodus at dusk, because dusk never arrived, and yet the day is ending by measure. In high-rise apartments, families would gather around windows, not to enjoy a view, but to witness a sky that seems determined to remain impossible. Elsewhere, the waiting would be more exposed. Small towns, isolated farms, research stations, ships at sea, mountain communities, desert outposts, offshore rigs, military bases, and polar settlements would all encounter the same fact under very different practical conditions. Some would have stores of fuel and food, strong local knowledge, and a culture of self-reliance. Others would depend heavily on regular deliveries or centralized coordination, but all would share the emotional condition of being held beneath a silence larger than weather. Even the sea, for all its motion, cannot make such a sky feel ordinary. Night animals and day animals would by now be deep in confusion. Some nocturnal species might have emerged for hours beyond their usual window, only to find that the air, temperature, or social signals do not match the darkness. Diurnal animals may have retreated earlier, conserving energy or clustering in familiar places. Livestock would need warmth, calm, and routine. Urban pets would absorb their owner's stress,
with the uncanny sensitivity domestic animals often show, zoos and conservation centers would be improvising ways to manage creatures whose habitats and behaviors depend on carefully tuned cycles of light and dark. The event would remind anyone paying attention that timekeeping in life is not abstract. It is built into flesh, feather, leaf, gill, and nerve. Plants, too, would be several missed hours deep into their interrupted day. Photosynthesis has ceased, but respiration continues. Stored sugars are being used. The effect over one day would not be catastrophic for most mature vegetation, yet the pause would be universal and exact. There is something haunting in that simplicity. Every green thing on the planet, from algae to forest canopy, would be living off what it had already made. For one day, life would be coasting on yesterday. The phrase sounds poetic, but it is also biologically precise. The Earth's surface, so often imagined as abundant and spontaneous, would reveal itself as an ongoing transaction with light. As the day lengthened, more people would begin asking not only what they needed to survive the night, like darkness, but what the event had already taken from their sense of the world. Catastrophes often destroy material things first and meanings later. This one would do both at once. It would remove sunlight physically, and with it, the unspoken confidence that there are some structures beneath human life too old to fail. Most people do not wake each morning in gratitude that the sun still exists. They wake inside that certainty without noticing it. The missing day would make the unnoticed visible by taking it away. That kind of realization can alter memory even before the crisis ends. People would find themselves replaying ordinary mornings in their minds with strange tenderness. The pale wash of dawn on a bedroom wall, steam lifting from pavement after early rain, sunlight on a child's hair in the back seat of a car, dust in a library window, the angle of afternoon across a kitchen table. These are not dramatic images, yet they are the fabric of ordinary life. Under an absent sun, the humble beauty of the former world would become almost unbearable in retrospect. Not because it was perfect, but because it had seemed permanent enough to ignore. The possibility of the sun's return would begin to dominate quieter conversations, not the loud public debates, which would still be filled
with expert commentary, emergency planning, and speculation, but the private ones. Do you think it will come back? What if it doesn't? What if it already has, somewhere else? The last question would reflect a deep instinct to imagine that perhaps the event is still local, or partial, or reversible from a point we cannot see. Yet the basic geometry of the problem would by now be too well established. This is a global absence. If there is to be a return, it will be a return to everyone or no one. And if it came, how would it be recognized? Not gradually, perhaps. If the premise grants disappearance, it might grant reappearance with the same unsettling abruptness. That thought would make many people keep watching the sky long after practical need suggested they should rest. Crowds might still gather in public squares despite cold and fatigue. Rooftops would hold silhouettes staring upward. Coastal promenades and hilltops, usually associated with sunsets and fireworks and celebrations, would become vigil sites. Human beings have always watched the sky together in moments that feel larger than history. This would be one of them. In those hours of waiting, language itself would likely begin to change. New phrases would be coined. The lost day, the black noon, the silent star, the gone sun.
History tends to name its traumas after events, places, or dates, and the naming is never trivial. It is one way memory begins to build structure around what was previously overwhelming. Even as the event unfolds, people would already be preparing its future name. That future orientation is a sign of endurance. To name something is to imagine surviving long enough to speak of it later. The return, if it happened, would first be experienced not through theory, but through a change in the sky. Perhaps the stars in one region of cloudless darkness would begin to fade. Perhaps an edge of light would arrive where no dawn should be, not from horizon to atmosphere in the normal way, but from the sudden reappearance of a source strong enough to overwhelm all others. Perhaps a strange glow would gather in the place where the sun belongs, too bright to look at, and after long hours of blackness, the eye would not trust it at first. The body might respond before the mind, heads lifting, hands pausing, breathing held, murmurs rising through streets, shelters, ships, hospital corridors, airport gates, and quiet rooms. Then, light. No single description could hold what that moment would mean. Some people would cry at once. Some would laugh with the almost angry relief that follows extended fear. Some would drop to the ground in prayer or exhaustion. Children who had been brave all day might finally collapse into sobs because the danger they had not fully understood is suddenly given shape by its ending. In scientific institutions, researchers who had spent hours in severe concentration would feel a very different but equally overwhelming release. In cities, cheers might rise from thousands of windows and streets. On farms and coastlines, people might simply stand still in the new warmth of photons returning to skin. Yet, even in that relief, uncertainty would remain. If the sun has returned, what else has returned with it? Solar radiation would once again begin pouring into the Earth's system. Light would restore visibility, shadow, color, and the ordinary chemistry of atmosphere and leaf. Solar power generation would begin resuming where equipment and grids remained intact. Human bodies, stressed by long darkness, would feel an almost immediate emotional correction. But the question of Earth's trajectory would still hang there. If the sun vanished and then reappeared after a day, how precisely the gravitational relationship resumed would depend on the impossible mechanics of the event. Science can reason around the edges, but not settle what lies at the broken center. The return would therefore be both salvation and a new mystery. In a plausible narrative of recovery, authorities would quickly shift tone again, from pure emergency to emergency plus assessment, grid restoration where needed, air traffic reevaluation, agricultural surveys, supply chain triage, public health monitoring, psychological crisis support, scientific observation of atmospheric and thermal aftereffects. The return of sunlight would not erase the lost hours any more than a heartbeat erases the memory of drowning. Much would still depend on local damage. Some places would have
endured with relative order. Others would have suffered outages, accidents, violence, medical disruptions, or severe exposure. The reappearance of the sun would not rewind history. It would only allow history to continue. Climatologically, the Earth would also need time to respond. A day without solar input is brief compared with seasonal scales, but not trivial. Surface temperatures would have dropped to varying degrees. Some regions would have lost significant warmth, especially inland and at higher latitudes or elevations. The oceans, having buffered the event, would now begin interacting again with renewed solar energy.
Weather systems, interrupted in their usual energy economy, would resume evolution under altered initial conditions. Scientists would likely spend years studying what a single day of total solar absence did to atmospheric profiles, surface temperatures, biological rhythms, and infrastructure. The event would become not only trauma, but data, though never merely data. Biologically, the return of light would trigger another wave of confusion before relief. Birds that had roosted, if they had roosted, might begin singing again at impossible hours. Flowers, responsive to light, could reopen or reset their cycles. Human bodies, already disoriented, would now be told by the sun that wakefulness belongs again to the world. Sleep would become even stranger in the immediate aftermath. Many people might remain awake simply because they could not bear to stop looking at the restored sky. Others would crash into exhausted sleep only once they were convinced the light would remain. Hospitals and emergency shelters would need to manage not just practical care, but the aftershock of relief, which can be as destabilizing as fear. There would be a temptation in the days and years afterward to treat the event as if it revealed only fragility, and fragility was certainly part of the lesson. The missing sun would show how little of modern life is truly self-powered, how dependent every food chain, climate system, and circadian rhythm is on a star 93 million miles away. How easily confidence can be stripped from the structures people call normal. But the event would also reveal another truth, quieter and perhaps more difficult to honor. Earth is not merely fragile. It is deeply buffered, richly connected, and astonishingly capable of carrying life through hours of extreme disruption. The oceans hold heat, the atmosphere endures, communities improvise, organisms wait out interrupted signals. Civilization strains, but does not vanish instantly. There is vulnerability in that, but there is also resilience. Resilience is not the same as invulnerability. It means the world can absorb a shock and continue, altered, sometimes scarred, sometimes wiser. One day without the sun would not be enough to end the biosphere, or freeze the oceans solid, or strip the air away. Yet it would be enough to leave a permanent mark on culture. Every future dawn would carry the memory of its absence. Songs, rituals, poems, scientific curricula, childhood stories, architecture, emergency planning, and even politics would change around the event. There would be monuments, perhaps, observances, anniversaries, museums, new branches of study. The old assumption that the sun is beyond history would be gone. It would now belong to history, because history would contain the day it was absent. Children growing up after such a day would hear about it with the same mixture of disbelief and inherited seriousness that later generations bring to wars, extinctions, pandemics, or near impacts. They might ask whether people really stood in streets under stars at noon, whether animals truly went silent, whether the world really cooled while everyone waited. Elders would answer, not with abstractions, but with remembered details. The taste of stale coffee under emergency light, the sound of a neighbor knocking to ask if anyone had medicine, the strange tenderness with which people looked at ordinary sunlight afterward. That is how civilization keeps the truth of an event alive, not only in measurements, but in sensory memory. For scientists, too, the event would become a kind of permanent reference point. It would sharpen public understanding of radiative balance, thermal inertia, orbital mechanics, photosynthesis, and systems dependence more effectively than any textbook could. But it might also deepen humility inside science itself. Even when knowledge is
precise, the world can still exceed human imagination. The laws of physics explain much, yet they do not grant emotional immunity from the implications of those laws. A physicist can model the loss of solar gravity and still feel dread. A biologist can understand circadian disruption and still be moved by the first bird to sing when light returns. The event would remind science that clarity and wonder were never enemies. There is another lesson here, one that lies beneath both fear and relief. The sun is ordinary only because it is constant. Human beings are not actually indifferent to it. They are habituated. We build roofs because it is there. We define days because it is there. We plant, harvest, migrate, travel, study, work, sleep, and imagine the future inside the trust that it will rise again. The missing day would strip away habituation and reveal dependence. That revelation would be frightening, but it would also be clarifying. To understand dependence is to understand relationship. Earth is not a self-enclosed stage on which life happens independently. It is a participant in a larger system, and that system is lit, warmed, and timed by a star. This has always been true, not only for humans, but for almost every leaf, wing, tide of air, and breath of plankton. Long before cities, long before mammals, long before flowers, long before vertebrates crawled from water to land, Earth's chemistry and climate were being shaped by solar energy. The history of life is, in one sense, the history of matter learning to use a star. Photosynthesis altered the atmosphere because sunlight was available to capture. Eyes evolved to perceive light because the world was lit. Circadian clocks arose because the rotation of a sunlit planet created regular change. The missing day would expose that deep lineage in a single stroke. It would show that the sun is not merely part of the setting of life. It is among the oldest conditions of life itself. If you were to step back even farther, beyond biology and civilization, into the scale of cosmic history, another feeling appears. The sun is permanent only in the narrow sense of human experience. Stars are born and die. They flare, evolve, swell, fade, collapse. Our star, too, is temporary, though on timescales so vast that they exceed human institutions, languages, and empires. The event imagined here is impossible in the natural order as we know it, yet it hints at a larger truth. Permanence is often just longevity viewed from a small life. The Earth is stable enough for creatures like us to arise, dream, and build. But it is not exempt from the wider indifference of the universe. And yet, that indifference does not make the world meaningless. If anything, it can make ordinary things more precious. The fact that dawn is not guaranteed by magic, but by a long chain of physical continuity, makes dawn stranger, not smaller. The fact that warmth on a stone, green in a leaf, and sleep guided by morning light all depend on relations beyond our control does not cheapen them. It gives them depth. A world that could lose the sun, even in imagination, becomes a world in which every ordinary day carries hidden grandeur, not because it is dramatic, but because it works. That may be the quiet heart of the whole thought experiment. Remove the sun for one day, and you do not simply discover how darkness behaves. You discover how much of Earth was always illuminated from within by borrowed fire. The blue sky, the calm rhythm of clocks, the warming wall of a house in afternoon, the rise of sap,
the feeding of coral symbionts, the movement of weather, the confidence of migration, the chemistry of breath, the ordinary ease with which morning enters a room. All of it belongs to an exchange so constant that it disappears into the background of awareness. Take it away, and background becomes revelation. By now, in the restored world of our imagined end, sunlight might be lying again across roads and roofs. The air might still be cool from the missing hours, but bright. People might be walking slowly, not yet ready to trust the normal world that has resumed around them. Birds may be testing song again. Emergency broadcasts would continue, but perhaps in gentler tones. Some would sleep at last. Some would remain awake out of reverence or fear. The first sunset after the event, when it came in its proper sequence, would likely be one of the most watched in history. Not because anyone wanted darkness, but because
they needed to see whether ordinary darkness still knew how to behave, and if it did, if evening descended with its usual softness, colors fading through gold into violet, stars appearing one by one in the right order, then another layer of healing might begin. Not full trust. Trust does not return all at once after the sky has broken, but a beginning, the world demonstrating its old grammar again. Light leaves slowly. Night comes by degrees. The moon shines with borrowed light. Morning waits somewhere beyond the horizon. The old structure, once invisible, becomes newly visible through gratitude. There would still be debates for generations about what really happened, about whether the event was cosmic, supernatural, unknown physics, a singular break in reality, or something beyond every current category. Scientists would continue investigating. Philosophers and theologians would continue interpreting. Artists would keep returning to the black noon and the first restored light. But beneath all interpretation, the physical lesson would remain beautifully simple. Life on Earth is local, but its conditions are astronomical. Every ordinary creature, every ordinary human day is lived inside an arrangement between a planet and a star. As the mind settles into that recognition, fear can gradually change its shape. What began as panic becomes awe. What felt at first like pure catastrophe becomes also a window into dependency, scale, and continuity. The missing sun reveals not only how easily humans can be frightened, but how profoundly Earth is woven together. Ocean and atmosphere, city and field, leaf and body, clock and orbit, all part of one larger pattern. The pattern is not invincible, but it is real, and usually it holds. Now the image can soften. Imagine the Earth once more from far away, no longer as a crisis map on a screen, but as a round world suspended in black, with a thin atmosphere clinging to it like breath on glass. Light touches one side, darkness curves over the other. Clouds drift in enormous white spirals above blue oceans. Continents carry mountain chains, forests, deserts, rivers, and cities, all turning slowly through the sunlight that has returned. Somewhere, dawn is beginning. Somewhere, it is noon. Somewhere, evening is gathering patiently. The old rhythm, so recently broken in thought, seems almost impossibly delicate and almost impossibly strong. Imagine then a single place on that world, a coastline after fear. The sea is calmer now, reflecting pale late light. The air still carries a trace of chill left behind by the missing day. A few people stand quietly on dark rocks or along a harbor wall, not speaking much,
watching the sky as if seeing it for the first time. Gulls move across the wind. Small waves touch stone and withdraw. Farther inland, windows are lit in houses where tired families are finally resting. Somewhere, a kettle begins to steam. Somewhere, a child has fallen asleep with curtains open, unwilling to lose sight of the sun again. The sky above that coast is ordinary, and therefore miraculous. Cloud edges glow. The first evening star waits in its proper place. The colors arrive slowly, not as emergency light, but as the calm mathematics of atmosphere and angle. Gold fades to amber. Amber softens into rose. The blue deepens. Nothing hurries. Nothing needs to explain itself. The sea keeps breathing in long, patient lines. The land gives back the warmth it gathered during the day. Birds cross the shallowing light on their way to rest. It is the kind of evening people once ignored without guilt. Now, every small change of color feels like a blessing too large to mention. If you stay there a little longer in imagination, the larger thought begins to quiet as well. The questions of orbit, energy, biology, infrastructure, and time have not disappeared. They remain true, and they matter. But around them, another truth settles. The world is vast, and most of what sustains it happens without ceremony. We do not hear the atmosphere holding heat. We do not hear leaves turning light into sugar. We do not hear the planet curve through space around its star. We live inside those processes as fish live inside water, and only their interruption reveals their song. So, the restored sunlight on that imagined coast becomes more than relief. It becomes a reminder of hidden continuities, the warmth on stone, the brightness on water, the line between day and night moving gently over the planet. A star
holding a world in its care, without intention, without favor, simply by existing. For billions of years, that relationship has shaped air, ocean, rock, and life. For one impossible day in thought, it was removed, and in its absence, Earth became legible in a new way. Then it returned, and legibility remained. In that renewed light, even shadows would look different. They would no longer seem like evidence of loss, but of form returning. Trees would cast themselves across paths again. Chimneys, church towers, cranes, and hills would all reclaim their outlines, proving with every edge that illumination had found the world. Perhaps that is where the mind can finally rest, not in the fear of the vanished sun, and not even in the drama of its return, but in the quiet understanding that ordinary reality is already far stranger and more beautiful than habit allows. A sunrise is not routine. It is a cosmic arrangement arriving faithfully once again. A warm leaf is not simple. It is solar history made immediate. Sleep under a window where dawn will someday appear is not trivial. It is trust given by a planet that still turns and a star that still burns. The sea darkens slowly now. The last color leaves the horizon in peace. A few lights blink on in the distance, small and human, nothing like the flood-lit defiance of the missing day, just the gentle signs of evening life continuing. Above them, the sky grows deep and clear. Stars return to their rightful hour. The first coolness of night settles over the water. The tide keeps its patient work among the stones. Somewhere beyond sight, forests breathe, cities hum more softly, animals settle, leaves fold, and oceans carry their stored warmth through the turning dark. And overhead, where it has always been,
where, for one impossible day, it was not, the path of the sun waits beyond the horizon, hidden for now, certain again only in feeling, while the earth, no longer imagined as abandoned, turns quietly toward morning.